I want everyone listening to do something for me right now. Unless you're driving. Please, keep your hands on the wheel if you're driving,
Yeah.
but otherwise just hold up your hand.
Go on.
Wiggle your fingers, clench a fist.
It feels pretty solid, right? The structure underneath.
Incredibly solid, rigid, architectural. I mean, if I asked someone to describe their skeleton, they'd probably say it's, the frame of the house.
The scaffold.
Yeah, the co-hanger for the meat. It's just this dead, dry rock that stops us from being a puddle on the floor.
Which is exactly what you see in a museum, right? You see this dry, white, brittle, unchanging bone. But that image, it is a complete lie. It is probably one of the greatest tricks physiology plays on our perception.
A lie. How so?
A total illusion. If we could shrink down right now, magic school bus style, and stand inside your femur, it wouldn't look like a statue. It would look like a chaotic construction site.
A construction site.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a bustling, living reservoir that is constantly dissolving itself, rebuilding itself, and trading its assets with the blood second by second.
And that transaction between the bone and the blood is what we're diving into today. Because it turns out the stakes aren't just about avoiding a broken hip. We're talking about electricity.
That is the central tension of this entire deep dive. It's the paradox of bone. To the naked eye, it's all structure, it's architecture. But to the physiologist, the skeleton is actually being held hostage by the nervous system.
Hostage, that's a strong word.
It's an absolute hostage situation. The reason your body is so utterly obsessed with regulating bone is because the mineral stored inside it, calcium, is the switch for your entire nervous system. If that regulation fails, even by a tiny fraction, the consequences are immediate and catastrophic.
We're talking about the difference between a normal heartbeat and cardiac arrest.
Exactly. If your blood calcium drops too low hypocalcemia, your nerves start firing uncontrollably. You get spasms, tetany, your throat can literally close up.
And if it goes too high?
The system shuts down. Hypercalcemia leads to CNS depression, coma, fatal arrhythmias. So the body will literally dissolve its own structural integrity. It will give you osteoporosis just to keep the blood levels stable for one more minute.
Wow. So strength is sacrificed for stability. That is a heavy concept.
It's a fundamental trade-off.
So our mission today is to understand how the body walks this tightrope. And to do that, we are synthesizing insights from two absolute titans of the medical library. We've got Ganong's review of medical physiology and the Guyton and Hall textbook of medical physiology.
And they bring two very distinct flavors to this meal. They complement each other perfectly.
I really like how we framed this in our prep. We're going to treat Ganong as the mechanic.
Yes, Ganon is going to get us under the hood. When we want to know how a cell actually eats rock or which specific genetic switch turns a stem cell into a bone builder, we go to Ganon. It's molecular, it's precise, it's all about the cellular machinery.
And
Guyton is our systems engineer. Guyton zooms out. It cares about the flow, the load, the buffering capacities. How did the kidney talk to the bone? How do we prevent the entire system from crashing? It's all about the big picture, integration, and regulation.
So the North Star for today, the theme I want everyone to keep in the back of their minds as we go, is this. Strength is not rigidity. It is regulated balance.
And that balance is maintained by a beautiful and sometimes, frankly, terrifying dance between three organ systems and three key hormones.
Let's map out the journey for everyone. We're going to start with the currency itself. The mineral players, calcium and phosphate. We need to know what we're trading.
Right, the assets.
Then we'll visit the bank vault,
Yeah.
the bone itself. We'll look at its structure and meet the cellular crew that works there.
The builders and the demolition team.
After that, we meet the managers. The hormonal trinity, vitamin D, parathyroid hormone, and calcitonin.
And finally, we'll tie it all together. We'll head to the filtration plant, the kidney, and see what happens when the whole production falls apart in the clinic.
Sound good?
Let's do it. Let's start with the minerals.
All right, section 1, the mineral players. We have to start with the VIP, the star of the show, calcium.
Calcium is absolutely the celebrity here. It drives the entire regulatory system. But the first thing you have to grasp about calcium is that its distribution in the body is, well, it's shockingly lopsided.
I was reading the numbers in Guyton on this, and they are just staggering. The average young adult has about 1,100 grams of calcium in their body. That's over a kilogram of pure metal.
Right. And think of your body as a bank. Where is all that wealth stored?
Well, The vast majority, 99% of it, is in the skeleton. It's locked away in the bank vault.
Exactly. It's locked in the vault in the form of hard hydroxyapatite crystals. Then you have about 1% inside your cells, tucked away in the mitochondria, the endoplasmic reticulum doing important cellular work.
But the part we are obsessed with today, the part that keeps you alive minute to minute, is the tiny, tiny fraction in the extracellular fluid, the blood plasma.
And how much is that?
It's just 0.1%.
0.1%. It's insane. So of your total net worth, 0.1% is essentially the cash in your pocket.
And here's the kicker, right? The nervous system doesn't care about your net worth. It doesn't give a damn about the kilogram of calcium in the vault. It only cares about the cash in your pocket.
Precisely. If that 0.1% drops, the lights go out, the nerves crash, your heart stops. That tiny fraction is what carries the electrical current for your heart and your brain.
And to make it even more complicated, even that tiny white 1% isn't all available to use. It's not all legal tender.
No, this is where Guyton gets really specific, and it's clinically vital. When we take a blood sample, we measure total serum calcium. That number is usually around 9.4 milligrams per deciliter. But that number is actually 3 different things mixed together.
Okay, break that down for us.
So about 40 to 41% of that calcium is stuck. It's bound to proteins, mostly albumin.
So it's basically hitching a ride on a bus.
It's hitching a ride, but it can't get off at the stop it needs to. It's non-diffusible, it can't squeeze through the capillary walls, and it certainly can't trigger a nerve receptor. For all intents and purposes, it's biologically inert.
Okay, so that's 41% out of action.
Then you have a small slice, maybe 9%, that's complexed with anions like citrate or phosphate, also mostly inactive. The only thing that matters, the only thing your heart and nerves can actually feel, is the remaining 50%. The ionized calcium, the free-floating calcium ++1.
And this distinction seems like academic trivia until you realize how easily it can kill you. Which brings us to the pH trap.
Ah, yes, this is a classic physiological trap. A favorite for exam questions because it happens in real life. It all comes down to that protein carrier, albumin. Think of albumin like a sponge with a certain number of parking spots.
Okay, parking spots. I like that.
Calcium wants those spots, but hydrogen ions acid also want those spots. They are direct competitors.
So if my blood becomes more acidic, if I'm in a state of acidosis,
you have a flood of hydrogen ions. They rush the parking lot and they kick the calcium ions out of their spots. So your ionized calcium, the active stuff, actually goes up even if your total calcium stays exactly the same.
Okay, that's interesting. But you're right, the reverse is the really dangerous one, alkalosis.
Right. Let's paint a clinical picture. You have a patient in the emergency room having a massive panic attack. They are hyperventilating, breathing incredibly fast.
Which means they are blowing off CO2.
Exactly. And CO2 in water forms carbonic acid, so if you blow it off, your blood becomes alkaline. The pH rises, the hydrogen ions disappear, and suddenly all those parking spots on the albumin open up.
And the albumin gets greedy.
It gets very greedy. It starts grabbing the free ionized calcium out of the blood. So in a matter of minutes, the patient's total calcium hasn't changed at all, but their active ionized calcium plummets.
And because that active calcium is low,
the nerves become hyperexcitable, the sodium channels get twitchy, the patient starts cramping, their hands curl up into that classic carpal pedal spasm, which of course makes them panic more, breathe faster, and the whole vicious cycle gets worse.
And that is just from a shift in breathing. It really shows how unbelievably precise that set point needs to be.
The body fights tooth and nail to keep ionized calcium at almost exactly 2.4 millimoles per liter or 9.4 milligdl total. It tolerates almost zero deviation.
Okay, so that's the diva, the high-maintenance VIP calcium. Now let's talk about its partner. Phosphate.
Ah, phosphate. Phosphate is the working class hero of this story. If calcium is the strict high-maintenance celebrity, phosphate is the versatile guy backstage making sure everything actually works.
Guyton makes a really interesting point about how differently they are regulated. You said calcium is this tight decimal point control. Phosphate, on the other hand, is controlled by what he calls an overflow mechanism.
It's a completely different philosophy. For phosphate, the kidney basically sets a threshold, a transport maximum. It says, we want this many buckets of phosphate in the blood. If you eat more than that, it just spills over the dam and goes straight into the urine.
So there's no panic.
No panic. The blood level of phosphate can fluctuate quite a bit, maybe between 3 to 4 mg/dL in adults, and the body doesn't really sound the alarm in the same way.
Why the relaxed attitude? Why is it so different?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, phosphate is just chemically safer in the blood to a degree. And two, it's used for everything. It's the P in ATP, your fundamental energy currency. It's part of your DNA backbone. It's a major buffer for acid-base balance in the blood and urine. It's everywhere.
But they have a toxic relationship, don't they? Calcium and phosphate, you describe them as that couple that shouldn't be allowed at the same party.
They are a very dangerous chemical couple. We call it the solubility product. Basically, calcium and phosphate are chemically attracted to each other. Given the chance, they want to bind together and form crystals.
Which is great if you're trying to build a bone.
Fantastic for bone. That's the whole point. But it's terrible for your blood vessels. If you have high calcium and high phosphate in your blood at the same time, they will precipitate. They will literally turn into rock inside your soft tissues.
So you get metastatic calcification.
Yes. Crystals forming in your lungs, your arteries, your kidneys. It's a disaster. So a huge part of this whole regulatory story is about keeping them apart in the blood.
If calcium goes up, usually phosphate needs to go down to keep things safe.
That's the game. It's a constant balancing act.
Which is a perfect segue. We know the players. We know they want to turn into rock. So let's go to the one place where we actually want them to do that. The skeleton.
Section 2, the living reservoir.
I want to revisit that construction site metaphor. Because when we look at the actual recipe for bone, it's basically just reinforced concrete, isn't it?
That is the best engineering analogy there is. You have two main ingredients. First, you have the organic matrix. This is about 30% of the bone's weight.
And that's mostly collagen, right?
Yeah, 90 to 95% type 1 collagen fibers. You have to think of these as the steel rebar cables that you see in a concrete pillar.
Okay, so rebar provides tensile strength.
Exactly. Tension. If you grab a bone and try to pull it apart or twist it, the collagen is what stops it from snapping. If you didn't have collagen, your bones would be as brittle as chalk. You could shatter a femur just by jumping off a step.
Okay, so that's the 30% steel rebar. What's the other 70%?
That's the cement, the mineral salts, specifically crystals of hydroxyapatite.
Hydroxyapatite. It sounds like something you'd find in a geology textbook.
It basically is a rock. It's a very specific crystal lattice of calcium and phosphate. This provides compressional strength. It's what keeps the bone from being crushed under the weight of gravity when you stand up.
So collagen for tension, like steel, and hydroxyapatite for compression, like cement. And together you get a material that Guyton says has the tensile strength of cast iron, but is as light as wood.
It's a masterpiece of material science, truly.
But Guyton brings up a feature of bone that I think most people, including me, miss. We focus on the hard rock, the crystallized hydroxyapatite. But there's another, more accessible pool of calcium in there. He calls it the exchangeable pool.
Ah, yes. The first line of defense. This is so important.
This goes right back to our banking metaphor. The deep crystallized bone is the bank vault. It takes time and a lot of work to open that vault, but sometimes you need cash right now.
Exactly. Let's say your heart is beating, it's consuming calcium from the blood. Your blood level drops just a tiny bit. You can't wait 48 hours for a hormone to wake up a cell to start dissolving deep bone. You need calcium in minutes.
So where does it come from?
It comes from this exchangeable pool. These are amorphous salts, mostly things like calcium hydrogen phosphate, KHPO4. They haven't quite crystallized into that hard hydroxyapatite yet. They're just sitting loosely on the surface of the bone crystals in contact with the bone fluid.
Is there a lot of it?
In terms of total weight, no. It's maybe 0.5% to 1% of your total bone calcium. But, and this is the key, think about the surface area. Guyton give an incredible statistic for the surface area of your bone.
It's something like an acre, isn't it?
Roughly an acre. So imagine a very thin dusting of loose, easily dissolved calcium salt spread over an entire acre of surface. It's in direct chemical contact with the fluids. If the concentration in the blood drops, physics just takes over. Simple diffusion. The calcium dissolves off the surface and enters the blood.
And there are no hormones needed for this first step.
Not initially. It's just passive chemical equilibrium. It's the petty cash drawer. It buffers the blood minute to minute while the real hormonal system is, getting its boots on.
But eventually, the petty cash runs out.
Yeah.
And then you need to call in the heavy machinery. You need the cellular crew.
This is where we need to switch into Ganong mode. We need to get down to the cells.
Okay. We have the builders and we have the demolition team. The osteoblasts and the osteoclasts.
The yin and the yang of bone.
Let's start with the builders, the osteoblasts.
These guys are essentially modified fibroblasts. Their entire job is to spin out that collagen matrix, the steel rebar. But they don't just decide to do this on a whim. Ganong highlights a critical transcription factor here called RUNX2.
RUNX2. Sounds like a robot.
It basically acts like one. It is the master genetic switch. It's the signal that tells a mesenchymal stem cell, your destiny is to be a bone builder. In fact, if you knock out the RUNX2 gene in a mouse, it develops a skeleton made entirely of cartilage. It never makes bone.
Wow. So RUNX2 turns on all the machinery. But here's a question that always bothered me, and I think you have the answer.
Yeah.
If our blood is full of calcium and phosphate and they are super saturated and want to crystallize, why doesn't bone form everywhere? Why don't my arteries just turn to bone?
That is the crystal poisoning problem, and it's a brilliant question. The body is actually naturally resistant to calcification. We produce inhibitors, the main one is a molecule called pyrophosphate, that float around in all our tissues specifically to stop these crystals from growing.
So the default state of the body is do not calcify.
Correct. The osteoblast, then, has a secret weapon. It secretes an enzyme called TNAP, tissue nonspecific alkaline phosphatase.
Alkaline phosphatase. We measure that in blood work all the time.
We do. And high levels often mean high bone turnover. What TNAP does is it acts like a little pair of scissors. It neutralizes the inhibitor, it finds and destroys the pyrophosphate, but only in the immediate local neighborhood of the osteoblast. It creates a safe zone where chemistry is finally allowed to happen.
That is incredibly clever. It's not just pouring concrete. It's first clearing the minefield so it can then build the wall.
Precisely. It's localized control.
Okay, that's the builder. Now let's talk about the other side, the demolition team, the osteoclasts. Honestly, the way Ganong describes these things, they sound like monsters from a sci-fi movie.
They really are. There are these massive multinucleated giant cells. They're actually cousins of the macrophage, the immune cells that go around eating bacteria. But these have evolved to eat rock.
And the mechanism isn't just chewing. It's pure chemical warfare. Walk us through the sealing zone.
This is one of the coolest parts of bone biology. So the osteoclast lands on the bone surface. It uses proteins called integrins to anchor itself down, forming an incredibly tight seal.
Like a vacuum seal or an airlock?
Exactly. It isolates a tiny microenvironment of bone underneath it. We call it the bone resorbing compartment. Once that seal is tight, the cell does something amazing. It ruffles its membrane and inserts proton pumps.
Proton pumps. So it's actively pumping acid.
It is pumping hydrogen ions. It drops the pH in that tiny sealed-off space to about 4.0. It basically creates a stomach on the outside of the cell, right on the surface of the bone.
That is visceral. It vomits acid onto the bone to dissolve it.
It does. The acid dissolves the hydroxyapatite crystals. The cement just melts away. But you're still left with the rebar, the collagen matrix.
So how does it handle the steel cables?
Once the environment is acidic, it releases acid proteases, enzymes like cathepsin K that love acidic environments, and they just go to town slicing up the collagen. The cell essentially drills a tunnel right into the bone.
And this isn't random, chaotic destruction, right? It's a coordinated dance with the builders.
Oh, absolutely. It's the remodeling cycle. Think of a tunnel boring machine digging a subway tunnel. That's the group of osteoclasts at the front digging the hole. And right behind them, you have a team of osteoblasts coming in to fill in the walls of the tunnel with new cement and rebar.
Creating those concentric rings we see in diagrams of bone, the osteons or perversion system.
Exactly. And this is happening constantly all over your body right now. You are replacing your entire skeleton completely every 7 to 10 years.
The skeleton I had a decade ago is literally gone.
Chemically, yes. You are a new person, structurally speaking.
Right. So we have the bank vault, which is the bone. We have the cache, which is the blood calcium. We have the workers, the blasts, and the clasts. But workers don't work for free. They need a boss. They need instructions from management.
Which brings us to section 3, the hormonal trinity.
Vitamin D, parathyroid hormone, and calcitonin.
Let's start with the one most people have heard of, the provider, vitamin D.
And first off, Ganong has a bit of a bone to pick with the name itself. It's not really a vitamin, is it?
No, not in the classic sense. By definition, a vitamin is something you must get from your diet because your body can't make it. But we can make vitamin D. We synthesize it in our skin. It's really a pro-hormone, a steroid hormone precursor.
But it's not an instant process.
Yeah.
It's more like an assembly line that spans 3 different organs.
It's a journey. Step 1 is in the skin. UV light from the sun hits a molecule called 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is derived from cholesterol, and converts it into cholcalciferol. That's vitamin D3.
Which explains why we are so dependent on the sun for bone health.
And why modern life is such a disaster for our bones. We evolved running around the savannah naked. Now we sit in offices under LED lights, slathered in sunscreen. We're bypassing the very first critical step of the factory.
So let's say we get some sun or we take a supplement. We have vitamin D3. Is it active yet?
Not yet. It gets absorbed into the blood and heads to the liver. In the liver, an enzyme adds a hydroxyl group to it at the 25th carbon position. It turns it into 25-hydroxycalciferol. This is the main storage form. When your doctor measures your vitamin D level, this is what they are checking.
But it's still not the active weapon. It's just sitting in the waiting room.
Correct. The final step, and this is the critical control point, happens in the kidney.
The kidney holds the key to activation.
Literally. The kidney has an enzyme called 1-alpha hydroxylase. It adds a second hydroxyl group, this time at the first carbon position, and turns that storage form into 1025-dihydroxycholecalciferol. That is the active hormone. That is calciferol.
Why is such a complex chain? Why not just activate it all in the liver and be done with it?
Because you need a gatekeeper. Vitamin D is incredibly powerful. If you just activated everything you ate or made from the sun, you'd become toxic. You'd absorb way too much calcium. The kidney acts as the throttle. It only activates the hormone if the body sends a signal that it needs it.
So once the kidney finally turns the key, what is vitamin D's actual job? If you had to summarize its mission statement in one sentence.
Vitamin D is the provider.
Yeah.
Its main job is to get calcium into the economy. It goes to the intestine and it opens the doors.
Gannon gets right into the weeds on the molecular mechanism here. It binds to a receptor inside the gut cells, right, on the DNA.
Yes, the VDR, the vitamin D receptor. It's a nuclear receptor. It goes to the nucleus, and it upregulates the production of a whole suite of specific proteins. It tells the cell, build the machinery to absorb calcium.
And that machinery includes the door itself.
Right, it builds the door. And an epithelial calcium channel called TRPV6 that allows calcium to enter the intestinal cell from the food you ate.
And it also builds the ferry boat.
The ferry boat, exactly. A protein called calbindin, because remember, free calcium is dangerous inside a cell. It's a signaling molecule. You can't just let it float across the gut cell lining. It would trigger all sorts of chaos. So calbindin acts like a shuttle. It grabs the calcium as soon as it enters, puts it in a safe container, ferries it across the cell, and then pumps on the other side, push it into the blood.
So without vitamin D, you could drink all the milk in the world, but it's just going to pass right through you.
Exactly. You can starve your bones in the midst of plenty.
Okay, so vitamin D brings the cash into the bank. Now let's talk about the bank manager, or maybe the crisis manager. Parathyroid hormone, or PTH.
PTH is the boss. It's the minute-to-minute regulator. It comes from 4 tiny little glands tucked in behind your thyroid, the parathyroid glands.
And this trigger is completely unique, isn't it?
It is. It's almost backward. It uses a special receptor called the calcium sensing receptor, the KSR. Most glands wait for a signal to turn on. The parathyroid is different. It's always wanting to be on, but calcium keeps the brake pedal pressed down.
So high calcium equals silence from the gland.
High calcium inhibits PTH secretion. But the moment blood calcium drops, the brake releases, the gland wakes up, and PTH floods the system.
And it goes into crisis mode. We need calcium now.
It acts on 2 main targets, the bone and the kidney. But the action on bone has this really interesting timing mechanism. Guyton calls it the dual phase action.
Phase 1, the rapid phase.
This happens in minutes. PTH hits the osteoblasts and the osteocytes, the cells that are already living inside the bone matrix. It tells them, open the taps. It activates pumps to drain the fluid from that canalicular system, that exchangeable pool we talked about, and pump it into the blood. This is called osteolysis.
So it's liquidating the most liquid assets first. Does it damage the bone structure?
Not really. It's just moving fluid and some loosely bound minerals. But if that's not enough, if the calcium level stays low and the crisis continues.
Now we get to phase 2.
The slow phase. This takes hours, days, even weeks to fully ramp up. This is where PTH gives the order to dissolve the volt itself. It activates the osteoclasts. But wait, I remember reading this in Ganong and thinking it had to be a typo. Osteoclasts, the demolition team, they don't have PTH receptors.
They do not. It's one of the most elegant and initially confusing parts of the system. The osteoclasts don't listen to the bank manager directly. They only listen to their immediate foreman, the osteoblast.
So PTH has to talk to the builder to tell the destroyer to start working. That seems so inefficient.
It seems inefficient, but it's a critical layer of control. It's a game of telephone. This is the ankylal system. It is arguably the most important signaling pathway in all of bone biology.
Okay, walk us through it. Ankylal.
PTH binds to its receptor on the osteoblast. The osteoblast then produces a protein on its surface called RANKL. That stands for rank ligand, and RANKL is the go signal.
It's the command to kill. ANKLL on the surface of the osteoblast then binds to its receptor called RANK on the surface of preosteoclasts, the dormant monsters. That binding is the signal for them to fuse together, mature into giant active osteoclasts, and start eating bone.
But surely there's a safety switch, a break. You don't want runaway bone destruction.
There is, and it also comes from the osteoblast. The osteoblast also produces a decoy receptor called OPG, osteoprotogerin.
OPG, the protector.
Think of OPG as a shield. It's a soluble protein that looks just like the rank receptor on the osteoclast. It floats around in the microenvironment and intercepts the ANKL. It grabs the go signal before it can reach the monster.
So it physically blocks the order from being delivered.
Right. So at the end of the day, your total bone mass really depends on one simple thing: the ratio of ANKL, the sword, to OPG, the shield.
And what does PTH do to that ratio?
PTH tilts the balance completely. It screams at the osteoblast to make more sword and less shield.
That is elegant.
Yeah.
And also kind of terrifying. Yeah. Now, PTH also acts on the kidney, and this is where I got a little confused before. It tells the kidney to do three things.
1. Save calcium. It increases reabsorption of calcium from the urine, especially in the distal tubule. Every last drop must be saved. 2. Activate vitamin D. It stimulates that 1-alpha-hydroxylase enzyme. It's calling the provider for backup.
Okay, those make sense. And 3, dump phosphate.
Yes. This is the one that trips everyone up.
It tripped me up. Why, if we're dissolving bone, we are releasing calcium 80 phosphate into the blood. Why would we want to throw away the phosphate? Shouldn't we save it to build new bone later?
Think back to our conversation about the solubility product, the dangerous chemical couple.
Ah, the risk of turning to stone in the blood.
Exactly. PTH is orchestrating this whole bone resorption to rescue the ionized calcium levels for the nerves. But that process dumps a ton of phosphate into the blood as a byproduct. If you let both calcium and phosphate rise together, they will precipitate. They will form those dangerous metastatic calcifications.
So PTH is playing 4D chess. It knows that to safely raise free calcium, it must lower phosphate at the same time.
It sacrifices the phosphate to keep the calcium soluble and active. It actively inhibits the main phosphate transporter in the kidney and flushes all the excess phosphate out into the urine. It's absolutely brilliant systems engineering.
Strength is regulated balance. I'm really seeing it now.
There is a third hormone, just to complete the trinity, though it's a bit of a minor player, calcitonin.
A counterbalance.
Right. It's produced by the parafollicular cells, or C cells, of the thyroid gland. Its job is the exact opposite of PTH. When blood calcium gets too high, calcitonin is released, and its main effect is to inhibit osteoclasts. It tells the demolition team to take a coffee break.
But Guyton and Ganong both seem, well, kind of unimpressed by it in adults.
In adult humans, it's a bit of a weakling. If you have your thyroid removed and you lose all your calcitonin, your long-term calcium regulation is basically fine. PTH and vitamin D do all the heavy lifting. The system still works.
So why do we even have it? Is it just evolutionary baggage?
The thinking is that it's probably much more important during times of high calcium stress. During a big growth spurt in children, for example, or during pregnancy and lactation when there's a huge demand for calcium. Calcitonin might be there to protect the mother's skeleton from being eaten alive to support the baby's growth.
A sort of skeletal protection hormone for special occasions.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move to section 4, the kidney. We've touched on it as the activation plant for vitamin D and the dump site for phosphate. But Guyton really emphasizes just how much work it's doing constantly in the background.
The kidney is the master filtration plant. The numbers are just huge. About 60% of your plasma calcium is filterable, the ionized and complexed parts. And of that, the kidney reabsorbs over 99% of it. It is constantly sifting through this river of blood to catch every last gold nugget of calcium.
Let's do a quick fly-through of the tubule just to anchor the key sites.
Sure. First, the proximal tubule. This is the bulk handler. About 65% of the filtered calcium is reabsorbed here. It's mostly passive. It just follows along with the sodium and water that's being reabsorbed. No hormonal control here.
Then we get to the loop of Henle, specifically the thick ascending limb.
Right. Another 25 to 30% is reabsorbed here. And interestingly, this is also where most of your magnesium reabsorption happens. It's a mix of passive paracellular movement and some active transport. PTH has a small effect here.
And finally, the last part of the system, the distal tubule and collecting ducts.
This is the fine-tuning knob. This is where the last 49% is handled, but it's where all the precise moment-to-moment regulation happens. This is where PTH exerts its most powerful control. It uses a specific channel, TRPV5, to dial in the exact milligram of calcium to keep or lose. This is where the final decision is made.
Okay, we've built the system, we understand the bank vault, the managers, and the filter. Now, in our final section, let's break it. Let's do the clinical thought experiments.
This is where it all comes together. Physiology is just pathology waiting to happen.
Scenario 1. The twitch. Hypocalcemia.
So your blood calcium drops. We mentioned the hyperventilation and panic attack earlier, but let's get into the core mechanism. Why exactly does low calcium make nerves twitchy?
Yeah, you'd think less electricity fuel would mean less firing, but it's the opposite.
It's totally counterintuitive. It comes down to voltage-gated sodium channels. These are the channels that have to open to start a nerve impulse or a muscle contraction. Normally, calcium ions sit on the outside of the nerve membrane and stabilize these channels. They act like a heavy doorstop, making the channels harder to open.
So if you take away the calcium doorstop,
The door gets incredibly light. The wind could blow it open. The sodium channel becomes hyper-excitable. The threshold for firing drops so low that it starts firing spontaneously without any stimulus.
and that's what causes the muscle cramps.
That's tetany. And if that spontaneous firing hits the larynx, the muscles of the voice box, you get laryngospasm. The airway closes, you can't breathe. It can be fatal in minutes.
Okay, scenario 2. The slump. Hypercalcemia.
Too much calcium, too many doorstops on the sodium channels. The nerves become sluggish. The threshold for firing goes way up. The whole nervous system gets depressed.
What are the classic symptoms?
There's a famous old mnemonic for it. Groans, moans, stones, and bones.
Okay, break that down. Groans.
That's constipation and abdominal pain. The smooth muscle of the gut slows right down.
moans.
Psychiatric moans. Depression, lethargy, confusion, eventually coma. The brain is being dampened.
Stones.
Kidney stones. You're filtering so much calcium through the kidney that it precipitates in the tubules, forming calcium phosphate or calcium oxalate stones.
And finally, bones.
Bone pain and fractures. This is because usually the cause of the high calcium is that the bone is being dissolved at a high rate.
Let's talk about the bone diseases themselves. Rickets in children and osteomalacia in adults.
This is a quality control failure. This is the disease of soft bones.
And this goes right back to our reinforced concrete metaphor.
Exactly. In rickets, you have the builders, the osteoblasts, working hard. They're laying down the collagen rebar, what we call the osteoid, but you don't have enough calcium or vitamin D, so the cement never arrives to harden it.
So you end up with a building made only of flexible steel cables.
Right. It's structurally weak. It bends under pressure. That's why kids with rickets get the classic bow legs. The weight of their own body bends the femurs because they lack the compressional strength of the mineral.
Now contrast that with the big one, the one everyone has heard of, osteoporosis.
Osteoporosis is a quantity failure, not a quality failure. In osteoporosis, you are losing everything. The rebar and the cement. The bone that remains is chemically normal. It's hard, but there's just less of it. The walls of the bone are getting thinner and thinner.
And Gannon breaks down the different types. Postmenopausal osteoporosis is the one everyone knows about.
And this is the NAKL and OPG story all over again. Estrogen is a friend to bone. One of its key jobs is to stimulate the osteoblasts to produce OPG, the shield.
So it keeps the osteoclasts in check.
Exactly. But when menopause hits, estrogen levels plummet.
The shield drops.
Shield drops. RNKL goes unopposed. The monsters, the osteoclasts, go on a feeding frenzy. A woman can lose a massive amount of bone density in just the first few years after menopause.
And then there is disuse osteoporosis, the use it or lose it law of physiology.
This is a concept called mechanotransduction. Bone is smart. It senses mechanical stress. When you walk, run, or lift weights, you put strain on your skeleton. The osteocytes sense this and signal the osteoblasts to build more bone.
But if you're an astronaut in zero-G, or if you're stuck in a cast for 6 weeks,
The bone realizes it isn't carrying a load. It thinks the bank vault is too big and expensive to maintain.
why am I paying for security on an empty building?
Exactly. So the remodeling cycle shifts heavily towards resorption. It dissolves the unused bone and recycles the calcium for other uses. It's brutally efficient.
One last pathology. Hyperparathyroidism. The boss goes rogue.
There are two main kinds. Primary hyperparathyroidism is usually a benign tumor on one of the parathyroid glands. It just pumps out PTH nonstop. It doesn't listen to the feedback from high calcium. It just keeps screaming, more money, more money.
So it strips the bone bare and floods the blood with calcium.
Yes. It excavates the bone, causing these cystic cavities called brown tumors, and you get massive kidney stones and all the symptoms of hypercalcemia.
And secondary hyperparathyroidism, how is that different?
Secondary is a tragedy of compensation. This isn't the gland's fault. It's responding appropriately to a problem somewhere else. The classic cause is chronic kidney disease. The failing kidney can't activate vitamin D, so you can't absorb calcium from your diet. Blood calcium drops.
And the parathyroid gland sees the low calcium and tries to help.
It screams for help. It grows bigger. It undergoes hyperplasia. It pumps out absolutely massive amounts of PTH to try to strip calcium from the bone, all in a desperate attempt to keep the heart beating. It is destroying the skeleton to save the patient from the consequences of the failing kidney.
It's the body eating itself to stay alive.
That is the harsh reality of physiology sometimes.
This has been absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Let's try to bring it all home in the outro. We've covered the minerals, the matrix, the hormones, and the pathology.
It really is a beautiful dance, isn't it? The diet brings the minerals in with the help of vitamin D. The bone stores it, managed by the constant remodeling crew. The kidney filters and fine-tunes it under the watchful eye of PTH.
All to maintain that tiny, tiny 0.1% in the blood.
The 0.1% that keeps the lights on.
You know, this entire deep dive has completely reframed the skeleton for me. I started this conversation thinking of it as a coat hanger, a static frame.
And now?
Now I see it as a metabolic bank vault. It's an active participant in the economy. It's constantly transacting with the blood, making deposits and withdrawals.
And that leads to the final provocative thought I want to leave with everyone listening. We often look at a disease like osteoporosis or the bone loss from kidney disease as a failure of the system. But physiologically, it's actually a success.
How can it possibly be a success?
Because the body makes a choice. It is faced with a trade-off. It chooses to dissolve its own long-term structure, to make itself frail and prone to fracture, just to maintain the electrical stability of the blood for one more minute. The survival of the immediate moment, the heartbeat, the nerve impulse, always trumps the longevity of the structure.
Hardness is sacrificed for responsiveness.
Every single time.
That is a powerful thought to end on. If you want to see the incredible diagrams of these feedback loops, and you really should, specifically the Rankel-RPG pathways, we highly recommend you check out the relevant chapters in Ganong and Guyton. They are absolutely worth a look.
Absolutely. The visuals make it all click.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next one.